Secondly, most of the views about women that were developed during the classical period had very little clear and direct support in the texts of the Holy Qur'an on the issue of women. True, there are a handful of Quranic verses that could be read, and in fact have been read, to justify certain discriminatory practices against women. But the vast majority of related Quranic texts, literally tens of them, or some would say hundreds of them, support the idea of equality of men and women in much the same way we accept the notion of gender equality in the West today. Thirdly, within the broader Muslim world, that is, Muslim majority countries, from Morocco to Indonesia, modernizing states have introduced extensive legal reform in the area of classical Islamic jurisprudence, particularly in the family law area, thus discarding many of the classical discriminatory ideas and practices against women and coming to terms with the issue of gender equality. Of course, there are conservative elements in the Muslim world that are not happy with this. But the trend in the Muslim world is for adoption of the idea of gender equality and removal of ideas that discriminate against women, one by one. Fourthly, Muslims who are growing up in the West adopt the value of gender equality as a given. After all, it is an essential part of their cultural and social context in the West, in places like Australia. Classical ideas that discriminate against women are foreign to their understanding of Islam and what is fair and just today. In fact, we are seeing today many committed and practicing young Muslims, men and women, arguing strongly in favor of gender equality on the basis of the Holy Qur'an and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, notwithstanding the ultra-conservative voices that oppose such views. Their arguments are increasingly sophisticated, and they are developing principles and methodologies to read and interpret the Holy Qur'an in a way that emphasizes gender justice and equality. It is these voices that are gaining ground among many Muslims in places like Australia. Finally, many Muslims today see that the biggest hope for the adoption of the value of gender equality is the Holy Qur'an itself. For Muslims, it is what the Holy Qur'an clearly and explicitly says, and of course similar teachings of the Prophet Muhammad, that form the basis of authority in Islamic matters. Fortunately, the Holy Qur'an is remarkably liberal and progressive in its treatment of issues relating to women, if one reads it in its entirety. Literally, hundreds of Quranic texts can be used to justify the idea of gender equality. There are few verses that have been interpreted by early Muslims in a way that emphasizes discrimination against women. But the fact is, even such verses can be read and interpreted in a way that would support gender equality if one takes the 7th century social and political context in which the Holy Qur'an came about. This emphasis on gender equality and seeking new ways of reading and interpreting the Holy Qur'an and the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad today do not mean that in order to adopt ideas such as gender equality, Muslims must renounce Islam. In fact, the very opposite is true. These Muslims are grounding their understanding of Islam together with the fundamental values of the Western societies today, such as gender equality in Islam itself. They're developing an understanding of Islam that is relevant to their existence as Muslims in Western societies. Today, Muslim women interpreters of the Holy Qur'an in particular, for example, are playing a major role in this process by developing ideas for ways of reading and interpreting the Qur'an. If Muslims are going to remain true to themselves in the West and avoid conflict with key Western values and their notion of Islam, they will need this harmonization between their conception of Islam and their life in a Western society. That is exactly what is happening quietly right now in theory and practice.